Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome to our Building Data Culture from the Ground Up webinar. We're really excited to be here. My name is Gabi,
I'm Leah.
and we run Data Culture, which is a company focused on empowering organizations to solve problems using data and build lasting data culture. And we'll talk to you more about that in just a minute. But first, a little on our backgrounds and how we got into this work.
So for those of you who don't know, I actually got started in data at WeWork. I was an early employee there, and I arrived before there was a data team or much of a data infrastructure to speak of. So my first few years there, I really worked on building out the data team, data infrastructure. I did a lot of reporting and business intelligence work. And eventually I got a little bit tired of building dashboards. No offense to those of you who build dashboards, they're necessary and they can be very powerful. But what I really wanted to do was bring intelligence into products that WeWork needed to run the business. So I went more in a product direction, and I try to bring a product lens into all of the data work that I do. But the best work that I was able to do at WeWork in kind of the beginning of this journey that we're on now is work that I did with Gabi, building data literacy and data innovation programming out at WeWork.
So I joined WeWork a couple years back to help start their data visualization engineering team. I'd been working at the Washington Post, and I had this background in data storytelling and design and education. And Leah convinced me to come on and said, this company, there's a lot of opportunities, we're growing. And they were. And together we did help build out this data visualization engineering team, and we hired some exceptionally talented people. But as she mentioned, the most exciting work we did was creating a data innovation program that reached thousands of employees around the world, teaching them how to think about data to solve meaningful problems. And that was the foundation of our work around data culture. And now we go into companies of all sizes offering similar services and others. The focus of this talk is about building data culture from the ground up and creating this idea of lasting data culture. And we'll go into this more, but there are some common pitfalls that a lot of companies end up in when they set out to build data culture, because we know today people do care a lot about data-driven thinking, having a strong data team within their organization, but you're not going to create a data-driven culture by simply answering questions about your company's data. That's something that's important, but it's not the key piece to data-driven thinking. And similarly, a lot of the time people think it's all about technical skills. Everybody needs to be SQL proficient, and in that case, our company will be data-driven. And again, we've seen that doesn't actually change the bottom line. It doesn't save your business money, and it doesn't create a lasting data culture. What really matters is building a community of inspired employees who really want to solve problems using your company's existing data. And we're going to talk about how to get there in just a second. But this is sort of how most stories begin.
Yeah, so we know in a perfect world, business problems are really well defined, and then you find the data that you need to solve them. That's a dream scenario. Every analyst, data scientist, data engineer loves to work on those problems, but we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about how this actually goes often in practice. So sometimes it begins with something as simple as an email. Here is an email that I've received. It looks like this is at 11:42 at night. And turns out there's a big meeting tomorrow morning, and the board or maybe a new executive has a bunch of questions they want to answer. And to answer those questions, we need to look at the data. So obviously this is close to my personal experience and slightly emotional, but often what happens is you have a really diligent analyst who knows the systems really well, who kind of goes for it and braves reconciling data from all these systems in order to put some metrics together. As you go through this process, you start to realize that there are gaps, there are inconsistencies, there are definitions that you can't reconcile, and that's generally because different systems own different parts of the customer lifecycle, and the second you start to consolidate that, you're seeing a bunch of inconsistencies and stuff that you can't really make sense of. Nonetheless, you kind of come up with some metrics that you feel comfortable with, that you can stand behind, and you stay up really late to provide the numbers. So now it's 9 a.m. the next morning. Your boss has everything she needs to walk into this meeting and is feeling really good about it. But in the process of kind of presenting these numbers, people have follow-up questions. They want to dive a little bit deeper. They need more context. They're asking questions about how things are defined. Some of these numbers seem out of touch with how other industries are reporting on them. And you realize that it's actually going to take a lot more time to get to the bottom of some of those deeper questions. And you've exposed that you might not really have an infrastructure in place that allows you to kind of expose information and iterate on it quickly. So at this point, you've kind of finally made the case for building out a scalable data infrastructure. You finally have the support and the resources you need. Everyone agrees from the highest level down that that's something that you need to prioritize. So you think about what's required to get that process going. And the first thing that you'll do is evaluate all these tools that in some way or another promise to solve all your problems. Some of these are obviously very powerful and very useful, but the process of vetting them, understanding how they'll get around some of the same obstacles you face, understanding which might create more problems, it can be a difficult one to navigate. But let's say you've sort of figured out your ideal architecture, and it looks something like this. This is a bit overly complicated, as sometimes data engineering infrastructures are. This actually comes from Netflix. But you've worked with your CTO, you've talked to your technical stakeholders, your business stakeholders, and you've come up with something that you think can solve it. Amazing work. You understand the tools and everything required. The problem is this is a really big project, and it might take you a while to implement. And throughout that whole period, you can't necessarily get the answers that you need, and you're missing a big opportunity to have people in the business leverage the data that you already have. And this timeline is kind of a best case scenario. More likely, you're hiring a bunch of consultants, you have a bunch of implementation partners, you talk to more and more stakeholders, and suddenly this simple roadmap just becomes a really convoluted mess. And you can be halfway through the project and realize that you might not be able to get the answers that you need, or you've created more problems than you've solved. But in the best case scenario, you kind of get to the other side of this. You have a data architecture that makes sense, but you still haven't necessarily bridged the gap between people in the business who need to make decisions every day and the data that can help them.
And we really believe that establishing a strong data culture and having data literacy across the organization is the best way to help every employee make more informed decisions. We know that today, more than, or most people say that only 30% of the decisions that they're making at work are informed by data, and up to 73% of corporate data goes unused for analytics at all, and that doesn't even mention the 50% upwards number of dashboards that get built and not used once this data has been processed. So we know this is a huge problem, and we know that this is the point in which data can really make all the difference, but often when people set out to be more data-driven or to set up a data infrastructure, this informing decisions piece gets forgotten.
So we're not suggesting that you don't continue to iterate on your data infrastructure, that you don't invest in reporting tools and predictive analytics. You'll definitely need to do that, and that work will be ongoing. It's kind of something that you've never finished. It's just a part of what you need to build. What we're suggesting is there's a lot that you can do in terms of building data culture no matter where you are. So instead of waiting until you have all the data you think you need and exactly the right tools and all of the setup, start today. Start at day one and think about how you can bridge the gap between what the value your data can unlock and the problems your employees are trying to solve.
So we're going to talk to you a little bit about our approach and how we've set out to solve these problems in companies.
So again, instead of thinking about the infrastructure or kind of the desired state you have a year from now, 6 months from now, what we like to focus on is how to leverage your existing investments. How do you make use of what you have today? And the most important things that you have today, number one, is obviously your people. That's your biggest investment and your biggest strength as an organization. Your employees know the problems, know some of the inefficiencies, and are really interested in becoming more efficient and better at their jobs and more effective in their roles. They often have a real desire and hunger for information. And if you can create an environment where they can access it and apply it to their work, they can be really successful. And the second piece is obviously your data. No matter where you are in your data journey, and no matter how much data you have or how little, you have information internally that could be really useful to your employees if surfaced at the right moment. So that's true of every company, no matter the state of your data infrastructure.
So another thing that we've focused a lot about, and we talk about it in this presentation and throughout our work, data literacy is a really good way to get everybody up to speed when you're building out data culture, and it's really important to exist on many different teams and be available to everyone. But another major component for us, we've created data literacy innovation programs that do teach technical skills, but focus equally on problem definition methodology and making sure that as people start learning how to access data better and build tools, they're thinking about this crucial problem-solving aspect throughout and making sure they can tie it back to how they can help the business. Second, we care a lot about multidisciplinary teams and making sure that you're bringing people into the room that don't usually talk to one another. We've seen so much success and creativity when you bring in engineers, architects, interior designers. We've had lawyers come through. Every single department is available. They should be getting involved in the data literacy part of this. So whenever you're teaching and whenever you're prototyping solutions to these problems, multidisciplinary teams is hugely important and not only exposes the problems, but is also helpful in solving them. We care a lot about human-centered design. Our methodology surrounds making sure that whenever we develop a data product solution, it fits neatly into your user's current process, and that you're not creating even more products that they need to then log into and will just simply slow them down and not be available at the point when they're making that decision that is currently uninformed. And then finally, we do a lot of rapid prototyping. So instead of spending months and months building out a product, we spend the bulk of time defining the problem that the product needs to solve and then rapidly prototyping a solution that can be iterated on over time. A lot of these prototypes are built within 2 to 4 days. And then later on, they become more robust products. This takes us all to this final point of data community where we really feel like the only way to create a lasting data culture is to establish a community beyond the data team itself of ambassadors and data champions who want to continue onboarding people to data literacy programs, sharing this message, and using data in their work to make better decisions and to save the company money.
So we care a lot about bringing data into decision-making processes and to making sure we're always solving problems with data, not just throwing dashboards and numbers at the problem. That said, sometimes there's a perception of data that we have to kind of overcome. So we're going to walk you through a little bit of how we teach people to approach data problems and how to kind of think through this product lens as opposed to a dashboard lens. So we think that in order to actually change how people think about their organization, you need to be really proactive about defining the decisions that you want to make more intelligent. And then when you think about building solutions, it's all about surfacing information to people at the moment they're about to make decisions. And we'll give you some examples.
So our favorite product example that we like to introduce is this amazing product here. When we speak to live rooms, we ask, how many people use this product and what decision are you making when you use it? This is, of course, the weather app, and it's a beautiful product. It's got, animation, and it's designed with perfect little data visualizations of clouds and the sun, and it's really a well thought through Apple initiative. But when I arrive at the weather app in the morning, there's only one choice that I want to make. I don't really care about what the weather's going to be later in the week. I have one main decision. What choice do you make, Leah, when you open the weather app? What decision are you trying to make?
Just trying to figure out, what do I wear?
What do I wear? What do I wear? Very simple question, and I'm getting a lot of information here, and that's because the way this product is designed, we think is more typical of a BI analyst mindset, and it looks more like this.
Yeah, so if we take that kind of typical SPRO dashboards and data at the problem mentality, you might end up with a BI solution that looks something like this. So there's a lot of interesting data here, a lot of questions you can answer, some well-designed visualizations. Maybe I'm looking at the weather every day in my neighborhood. Maybe I'm thinking about what did I wear every day? Was I cold? How did I feel? What does that 67 degrees mean? How did that feel? Was I well prepared? Those are all things that you kind of have to sort through on your own when you're presented with this amount of information. And again, you're still just trying to drive one decision, which is, what do I wear? So the reason this approach doesn't work is we've kind of forgotten that decision. We've just started exposing data in a lot of different ways, but all of those visualizations don't necessarily lead me to making a more informed decision. Or at least they're asking me to do a lot of work in order to do so. And you've lost sight of the person who's making that decision. So typically people don't like to, bounce around between a bunch of charts and do some, math in their head to figure out what to do. It's a lot better when information is presented in a really straightforward way and you can trust it.
So if we were to redesign the weather app by data culture, we would think about it like this. Really simple, really straightforward, basically the same data, but it just simply answers the question on any given day. Maybe you'd have the opportunity to look into the future or possibly into the past, but that information isn't served to you at the moment when you're making that choice. Really straightforward, and how we teach people to think about product development, especially data product development.
So that was a fun example that we can all relate to in our daily lives. But the point we want to make here is not, you should always know what to wear, but it's that every day at your company, people are making decisions that could be more informed. And we have to think about how to plug in data to make those decisions more intelligent.
Here's an example of a product that was developed in our data innovation program while we were at WeWork. It talks about a decision specific to interior designers. WeWork is a co-working space, and they're constantly designing out new spaces. Every day, interior designers need to decide which chairs to purchase for these new products, for their new projects, rather, the products for their projects. And they go to a really easy tool called Furnish, which is a catalog of all the different products, and they can choose which chair to order. They're often ordering hundreds at a time. The issue is when they go to make that decision of what chair to order, they don't have a lot of data to look at. They know what the product is, but there's a ton more information that exists within the business that isn't being shared with them. For example, community managers who work in the buildings, they know very well which chairs tend to break, which require expensive replacements, when they've broken while a member is sitting on them, a very bad member experience. They have no way to share that data back with the interior designers. But what if the interior designers knew right when they were making the decision of what to order, all of this anecdotal and qualitative information that could be leveraged to help make a more informed decision? So the product that was prototyped here was a feature add-on to the current app that interior designers use when ordering furniture that allowed community managers to input that data that already existed and rate all of the different furniture pieces so that they could then send that so that when the interior designer was ordering a new chair or whatever they're ordering, they can see a rating, and anything with terrible ratings would not get ordered. And we actually surfaced this problem when an interior designer had mentioned that on the same day she ordered 100 new chairs, one of them had broken in a building and caused a terrible member experience. So that was simply a data gap that was closed through this very quickly prototyped product that went to full product development and then became a part of our system. The way that our programming has worked in the past, and a big part of how we teach going forward in both small and large businesses, we break it down so that there's a core curriculum focused on teaching your data infrastructure for your company, key tables that everybody knows where they are, can access, but also heavily focused on problem solving. How do you analyze and define problems that the data can later solve, and making sure that those are a big part of how you start data literacy training. We also focus on electives and technical skills like SQL and Python and statistics. Those are equally important, but second to thinking about problems. And then finally, everybody who goes through the programming is tasked with developing a $10 million data product that solves a problem for the business worth $10 million. And we found that for most companies, it's actually really easy to get to that number because there are so many places where money is being left on the table, and simple data automations and solutions can solve them.
So we'll give you a couple more examples of $10 million solutions that we've built in our work. And again, the $10 million number can be scaled up or down depending on the size of your business. What we really want to do is always kind of prove that you can unlock a lot of value with your data solutions, and kind of suggest that you don't want to start building things or over-engineering things until you can prove that you're going to unlock value with it. So we'll give you some more examples. In the first one, we partnered with an education technology company, and they have a really high-touch application process. So someone applies, and there are many steps to get them through the application process, and that application process also serves as their sales funnel. So when we wanted to analyze the data, we were looking for gaps or opportunities to increase conversion throughout the sales funnel that could make a difference. And we found that at the very top of the funnel, we were actually, there's a huge opportunity to make an improvement. So 40% of qualified applicants dropped off immediately after they applied. They didn't even make it to scheduling their first admissions interview. These are people that have, shown interest, submitted information. They would be great participants in this program, and they're just not getting around to the first step. And the hypothesis was that that's because there's kind of a friction there, where you submit your application and you wait to get an email, and then you make a phone call, and then you schedule the interview. And we just didn't want to keep losing these people, because if we could increase their conversion by just 10%, we were talking about a $10 million opportunity. So the way that we solved this had a great team where we had, a representative from the data team, and some people on admissions and people in marketing. So they really understood kind of the underlying business problem. And what we did is used a machine learning model to score applications as soon as they came in. And for a subset of those applications, we could qualify them immediately without any human intervention. Now, for that subset, you don't want to lose them in the process of an email and a phone call and scheduling and calendars. So what we did was we allowed them to schedule their admissions interview immediately after they applied. And the hypothesis there was if we could kind of keep them moving through the funnel, then we'd see a big increase in revenue.
Another example is a real estate construction company we partnered with that was relying on external contractors to order all of the materials for new projects. This company developed a lot of buildings, and they had a lot of historic data on the development process, but they still just relied on general contractors to make all of these orders because it was easier and part of kind of the ordinary project management experience. However, when we looked at the data, we realized $20 million every year was being wasted over ordering this excess floor leveling material called float that was just used in all buildings to level concrete floors so that wood could be put down, that sort of thing. And the company had collected a lot of historic data on all their past buildings, but they weren't leveraging it. So the solution was actually really simple. By using, and the way that they created visualizations, they had all this point cloud data on all of the different buildings that showed exactly where floors needed to be leveled. So they generated a really basic calculator for project managers to use on new projects that allowed them to calculate the exact amount of float needed for a new project and then give that to contractors so that they were no longer guesstimating, and we could reduce that $20 million number. Really, really small, really, really easy solution, and all of the data was already there. And the only reason this problem was surfaced was because, again, we had an architect, a data scientist, and a project manager in the room together discussing things that they suspected could be leading to higher costs when developing new buildings.
So those are just a couple examples, but we want to kind of regroup it and make this point that bottoms up innovation can be really powerful. And the reason that's true is because your employees already know, or at least suspect, a bunch of opportunities to unlock value. They know which decisions are being made without any information. They know when something feels off. They know when a process is really inefficient in a way that management might not. So your employees are really close to problems, and it's an amazing way to leverage their knowledge and inspire them to think creatively about solving them. The other thing is once you can prove that you can solve $10 million problems and unlock all of this value with your existing employees and your existing data, you'll get the executive buy-in you need. So we've seen a lot of success with that. Once you can prove that you can solve problems with data, you'll get more and more investment, and you'll be able to scale things from there.
So to kind of wrap things up, we want to talk about this question of building lasting data culture. We talked about this at the beginning, how technical skills are important, but if everybody could write perfect SQL in your company, they may not still be able to tie that data back to actually solving problems. It wouldn't build lasting data culture. Similarly, if you can create a bunch of dashboards that answer all of the data questions ever to be wondered about in your organization, that's great. It's really hard to do. It's going to change a lot over time, and it's not necessarily going to create this lasting data culture. But when you create a community of inspired employees who want to solve problems using data and teach that ideology, and onboard new people and kind of build it into the culture of your organization, you can really create change and ultimately change the bottom line by empowering the people and using your existing data. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed, and feel free to reach out with any questions.